Biden personally led the effort to give China permanent most favored nation status, which is a tremendous advantage for a country to have. Few countries have it, but the United States doesn't have it. Never did, probably never even asked for it, because they didn't know what they were doing. As Vice President, Biden was a leading advocate of the Paris Climate Accord, which was unbelievably expensive to our country, would have crushed American manufacturers while allowing China to pollute the atmosphere with impunity. Yet one more gift from Biden to the Chinese Communist Party. They took all of the advantage away from us. They took everything away. They don't have oil. We would have had to close up tremendous amounts of our energy to qualify eventually, not too far into the future. We would have had to do things that would have been unbelievably destructive to our country.
Welcome to War Room Pandemic, episode 281, Wednesday, July 15th, the year of our Lord 2020, broadcasting live from Capitol Hill. Greg Manns, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon down the line on the John Fredericks Radio Network on Newsmax, blown through the CCP's firewalls on G News and GTV, subtitled in Mandarin, and of course, thanks to America's Voice, over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, let's play the, I tell you what, Raheem, let's play the, we have another clip of President Trump with regarding President Xi. Can we play that?
Let's roll.
Thank you, sir. I want to know, when's the last time you spoke with President Xi of China? And do you plan to speak with him in the near future?
No, I haven't spoken to him. Well, no, I don't. I have no plan to speak to him.
Steve.
I tell you what. I think we have the other clip teed up. The Richard Haas clip on the about pulling the lever.
Yeah, we do.
If we get a China-focused argument in this election, what's that going to look like?
Well, first of all, I don't think too many people at the end of the day, John, are going to push or whatever you push now based upon China. And with issues like race, tens of millions unemployed, over 135,000 people dead from COVID-19, I just don't think anyone is going to succeed at putting China at the center of the election.
Steve.
You're seeing the establishment run for the hills. You know, Richard Haas is just once again dead wrong. Richard Haas is one of the guys that's given the advice that led to the managed decline of the United States of America. He's one of the central culprits here in the Foreign Policy Center for Foreign Policy, the Foreign Policy Council on Foreign Relations. Just absolutely a complete, total disaster. And yesterday in the Rose Garden, just a seminal day. Didn't actually hit all the hot buttons of the Ultra Hawks, but you look at what's happened in the last 72 hours, and we've been saying that Hong Kong is Czechoslovakia in 1938. Remember when on September 30th, 1938, when Neville Chamberlain came back, people were focused on, I think Don Budge had just won the U.S. Tennis Championship at Forest Hills. The Yankees won the pennant. The 1938 hurricane had just come through Long Island. This was looked at as not something central to people's lives, everyday lives. And here's the key. The key is a year later, Poland was invaded. 2 years later, London was being bombed. 3 years later, we were at Pearl Harbor. And so people who were going about their daily lives didn't understand the importance of Munich at the time and what happened in Czechoslovakia. That's what happened in Hong Kong yesterday. Absolutely, President Trump threw down, and not just what he said in the Rose Garden, but all the aspects of bringing together the geopolitics of really standing up the Alliance for Liberty, standing up against the totalitarian dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party. And yesterday, for the first time, I think he called the Chinese Communist Party out by name, held them responsible for what's happened with this coronavirus, held them responsible for all this mayhem that's going on throughout the world. And you see Richard Haas, and that's the establishment. We talk about the managed decline of the United States. Right in Richard Haas and Morning Joe. Morning Joe is the conventional wisdom. If you ever want to see the conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C., just listen to Morning Joe. Richard Haas is the conventional wisdom. They are so petrified of having this election go around the war with China. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party is in a hot economic war and a hot information war right now with the United States. And I got to tell you, what Mike Pompeo threw down the other day about the South China Sea, what India is doing up on the border of occupied Tibet, what you're seeing coming throughout the world of the EU with Pottinger and Robert O'Neill over there talking about expanding NATO's presence in the South China Sea. You see the United Kingdom stepping up. You see the Huawei situation. You see TikTok. If you just go through, we're fully engaged now. And Donald Trump has done something, and New York Times is even talking about it. Donald Trump's done something that no president's been able to do. He's pulling together an alliance of liberty from Japan to the littoral nations around the South China Sea, to Poland and the Three Seas nations, to the United Kingdom, to the EU. You're bringing together an alliance of liberty, Australia, to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party and their allies. We've talked in the show, and I've talked for years, about the Chinese Communist Party trying to consolidate the Eurasian landmass. I talked about a deal with Iran, and I was mocked. I think it was on Samantha Bee's show a couple of years ago, Raheem. I was actually mocked by Samantha Bee saying, "Oh, they don't have a treaty, man, it's crazy." It was about this film that came out about me called The Brink, of which I would draw the little diagram between China, Iran, Turkey, Russia, Pakistan, North Korea. You know, she was, they were having a belly laugh. Hey, guess what, Samantha, you were wrong. They've been working on this for a long time. We're now seeing the details of a $400 billion deal, 25-year strategic partnership between the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, and the mullahs in Iran. And it's just not buying oil. It's just not supplying cash to the mullahs to get around the sanctions of the United States. It's also talking about military engagements, talking about working with Hezbollah to engage up in places like Syria. So the Chinese Communist Party is trying to consolidate the European landmass. Donald Trump yesterday, and here's one of the tells, Raheem, as soon as he started talking and pivoted to Joe Biden and Joe Biden's record on China, CNN and MSNBC couldn't wait to get off. Here's the tell. This is why we call it war room pandemic. I realize some of the viewers are saying, oh, you got to shift to 2020. The pandemic in CCP is 2020, okay? Everything else is marginalia. And this is why we're going to have a clip from Richard Haas in a minute about Joe Biden's economic nationalism, okay? It actually comes across with Richard Haas's words. Economic nationalism doesn't mean anything if you don't confront the slave labor problem in the Chinese Communist Party. They know Joe Biden can't do it. They know Joe Biden's track record is horrible. They are absolutely, completely petrified of what Donald Trump did in the Rose Garden yesterday. Now, we'll talk about the rest of it. He's comparing and contrasting the platforms of the Democrats, some other issues he got to. But if you take that first 20 or 25 minutes, that is a total laydown. And let me tell you something. I spent all night talking to people in Hong Kong, talking to people throughout the world. The Chinese Communist Party, although President Trump was not as hard, I think he was held back by Mnuchin and the guys on Wall Street, he was not as hard as we wanted him to be on China, and they still could be on sanctions, right, with cutting them off from the U.S. dollar, cutting them off from all technology, sanctioning the big banks, sanctioning individuals, all that's potentially to come. It was pretty stunning what he got through yesterday, and I will tell you, the wealthy in Hong Kong understand the United States is now, Hong Kong's the anvil, the U.S. dollar and the financial weight of the United States is the hammer. And so yesterday, Raheem, very historic day. And I think people are going to look back over this. Is the first time President Trump's really stepped up and I think articulated his policy on the CCP and on China. And you see it coming together. And anybody out there, particularly the establishment, and the Trump supporters should understand this. They're going to be running for the hills. This is exactly what they haven't done. Remember, they all made money off of the rise of China. Richard Haas, this whole crowd, all they've done is make money. The elites in our country, the financial elites and the corporate elites, and Joe Biden represents them in Wilmington, Delaware. They have made money by shipping out the jobs. When Richard Haas says this race issue, when he talks about these other issues, they're all central to the economic business model of the party of Davos. It is centered around slave labor in China and everybody else, the working class in this country, particularly African American and Hispanic, being nothing but modern day Russian serfs. That's the business model. If that's confronted, you're going to have working class African Americans, working class Hispanics vote for you in droves. So, Raheem, I'd like to have your concepts. I want to get back to I want to play Richard Haas actually having the words economic nationalism cross his lips. This is the stuff Morning Joe, were crucifying people years ago, particularly when I first took over the campaign. I said, hey, if we run on economic nationalism and she talks about race, we'll win it hands down. And they went nuts, right? This is the rise of the Nazis. This is the rise of fascists. No, it's not. It's standing up for working class people. It's standing up for the middle class. It's reversing all the economic hardship that they've had put upon them by the elites in the United States of America, in the city of London, the elites in London and the United States, profiting off the slave labor of the decent, hardworking people in China, allowed by Beijing. So you're starting to see it. Yesterday, I think people will look back like in 1938. Remember, eventually it wasn't that important who won the pennant, who won the U.S. Open, or the 1938 hurricane. What stuck in people's minds was the horror of World War II and what eventually became of that. But people remember then, as they look back, that September 30th, 1938 was a big day. I think you'll see yesterday as just as big a day, and the West is now standing up. Raheem.
Yeah, and Steve, just so we can remind the audience of some of what happened yesterday as well, I want to play the other clip from the Rose Garden real quick, that 32-second one, also just to remind people of the stakes, and then we'll take them to the next Richard Haas clip. Let's roll this one first.
And make no mistake, we hold China fully responsible for concealing the virus and unleashing it upon the world. They could have stopped it. They should have stopped it. Would have been very easy to do at the source when it happened. In contrast, Joe Biden's entire career has been a gift to the Chinese Communist Party and to the calamity of errors that they've made. They made so many errors, and it's been devastating for the American worker.
I went through this again this morning. I actually printed it out. I have it all here in front of me, Steve, all fully marked up with my annotations. And it's a real tour de force, not just on China, not just on Biden, but also this unity document, Jack, that you raised, and Steve, you raised this morning as well. The unity document between the Bernie Sanders camp and the Joe Biden camp. This 10-page document that merges these two parts of the Democratic side, and it's hard to understand how they intend to run on a buy American economic nationalism on the one hand, while kowtowing and ceding so much ground to the very, very far left on the other. Jack.
Yeah, I mean, they're accommodating China on the one hand and playing hardball on the other. It's not going to work. This is Biden talking out of both sides of his mouth. So I think one of the important things that Steve has brought up.
But I don't even hear it. But Jack, when you say hold it, Jack, when you say hardball, I don't see any hardball in there at all.
No, I don't. That's why I say it's a pretense. He's pretending to play hardball with China. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth. It's Biden trying to play both sides of the fence.
I haven't heard, but this is my point. Where have you heard him say anything on hardball? I haven't heard Biden say one thing on hardball.
Well, he's saying that we're going to.
Yesterday, in 21 minutes, what did he say? What did he say?
Well, he says he's going to bring back the jobs, right? And then he talks about how we're going to replace all government cars with.
Jack, you're missing the point. He never says China. That's all just airy-fairy happy talk.
Yeah, we're getting there. We actually went through the whole document, Steve. He doesn't mention communists once.
We got to jump to a break. We'll get into this in the second segment here. War Room Pandemic, episode 281, just beginning. Stay tuned.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room here on Capitol Hill. Greg Manns, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, and Stephen K. Bannon. Hey, Steve, do I need to remind you and Jack, there's no fighting in the War Room?
I think we're on the same page. I wasn't making myself clear.
The war room fighting on.
Steve, where do you want to take us?
Play because you totally confused me. No. Do we have breaking news, Raheem?
We do have breaking news here this morning. At today's State Department press conference, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has announced new U.S. sanctions against Chinese tech company employees, including some at Huawei. We're getting the details on that now, but there's live breaking news this morning.
ladies and gentlemen, if your kids have TikTok on the phone, get rid of it. If you're using Zoom, get rid of it. You should be getting out of all these Chinese Communist Party technologies. They're all used they're all used for surveillance. They're all used to put up the firewall. They're used to surveil Chinese citizens. Once the firewall comes down, all those Chinese citizens will be using Western technology. They see that as one of the centerpieces of their freedom. It's so great to see now, finally, Raheem and Jack, Greg, that the U.S. is really stepping up. I know we're going to get into the technology part of it a little bit later, but I want to play again. Can we play Richard Haas and the economic nationalism, and then I want to play the other clip so people can tie this together.
Yeah, let's roll it.
I think what Vice President Biden has done is articulated a message of economic nationalism that in some ways steals the president's thunder and this administration's thunder. So politically, they're on the defensive because of the economy and their inept handling of COVID-19. And now the challengers in some ways taking a march on what would have been their core substantive economic issue.
Steve, does Biden have the march on economic nationalism?
No, but we gotta play that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the signal and the noise. Okay, this is the signal. The elites in this country, this is the tell. Trump campaign. They're embracing economic nationalism. They realize they can't sell globalism anymore. They can't sell. It's not sellable. Right there, they're saying, "Oh, he stole a march." They embrace. Play this clip again. This is important because this is how the hive thinks. This is how the party at Davos thinks. This is one of the senior intellectuals on national security policy. This is one of the guys, the architects of the Thucydides trap, which always said the United States is a declining power. China's a rising power, and we have to accommodate them in this very sophisticated kind of dance. It was all crap. The United States is an ascendant power. And now with our alliance of liberty with India and a rejuvenated Japan and a rejuvenated United Kingdom, we're the ascendant power. This was their biggest mistake. This was a fatal mistake. And for that mistake, they should just be thrown into the trash heap of history. And now they're sitting there in a bait and switch. It is impossible for Joe Biden to sell that he's an economic nationalist and a populist. For his entire career, he's been the concierge, he's been the shill for Wilmington, Delaware. Wilmington, Delaware is nothing more than a post office box, a bunch of law firms, and a friendly federal court, right? And lower state taxes for the multinational corporations. He was their concierge. That's why they put him on watch. He was the guy that was supposed to watch over Obama, because Obama was an anti-war populist. It is impossible for Joe Biden to attack China. It's impossible for Joe Biden to go after the CCP. And if you don't go after the CCP, you're not an economic nationalist, because that's the centerpiece of it. Yesterday in his 21-minute economic speech, he mentioned China in one passing reference that we're going to overtake them in electric vehicles or solar-powered cars or some sort of nonsense like that. It's the bait and switch. It's the misdirection play. And we're going to have young African Americans, Hispanics on this show day in and day out that understand. I mean, you look at, Ice Cube's economic nationalist plan a couple weeks ago. We'll get into that. It is economic nationalism. It's populism. It's about bringing the jobs back. Where are you going to bring the jobs back from? You're going to bring them back, the high value-added manufacturing jobs. We're going to bring them back from the CCP and end the slave labor of the people of China. Can we play the economic nationalism thing one more time?
Yeah, let's roll it. Richard Haas on economic nationalism.
I think what Vice President Biden has done is articulated a message of economic nationalism that in some ways steals the president's thunder and this administration's thunder. So politically, they're on the defensive because of the economy and their inept handling of COVID-19. And now the challengers in some ways taking a march on what would have been their core substantive economic issue.
And let's play, for the audience, I want to go back and replay Richard Haas's answer to John Heilman's question on China being the lever thing. Do we have that clip?
Yeah, we can go back to the last
If we
one.
get a China-focused argument in this election, what's that going to look like?
Well, first of all, I don't think too many people at the end of the day, John, are going to push the lever or whatever you push now based upon China. And with issues like race, tens of millions unemployed, over 135,000 people dead from COVID-19, I just don't think anyone is going to succeed at putting China at the center of the election.
Richard Haas, this is the great thing about going against the establishment. They're morons. China is the part of all of that. The central part of the race issue is the lack of jobs and high value added jobs in technology. The unemployment is because of the CCP virus. Trump's unemployment was all-time historic lows. The economy was on fire. CCP virus. And the dead are all, the blood is on the hands of Beijing. All three things he talks about, brother, is China. And Richard Haas, if you don't think you can run and hide, and you and Biden and you guys can go say we're economic national, we're populist, it's not going to work. We're going to rub your nose in it. Richard Haas, you represent an elite, and Morning Joe, you represent an elite that has destroyed the American working man and woman, okay? While you guys profited from it. You hung out with the CCP, you've got the Asia Society, you got the Century Club, you've got the China Cultural Association, Angela Chen and these people, all Bruno Wu, they're all these agents, all these intelligence assets or intelligence officers doing the money laundering, doing the influence peddling, all up there in New York and Washington, D.C. You're all going to the black tie dinners. You're all getting big fees from them. You're participating in their deals. You sold out your country, and you think you're going to avoid it. And CNN and MSNBC, I know you're getting jiggy there, Zucker, when you see Trump hammering Biden on his record against China and stepping up and saying, hey, guess what? I told you guys that Iran and China were going to get together. Now they're announcing it's leaking a 25-year, $400 billion deal. That's more than just oil and gas. It's a strategic partnership, they call it. Leaked into the New York Times and now the Washington Post. And the Washington Post headlines, I think it said Trump's two enemies. It's not Trump's enemies, the enemies of the United States of America and free men and women everywhere. Jeff Bezos and the Amazon-owned Washington Post. So this is where Trump's bringing this alliance together. As much as Richard Haas mocks him, Joe Scarborough mocks him, Mika mocks him, they all mock Trump. He's pulling an alliance together, and you can see it everywhere. And that's why they hope and wish and pray that Trump does not make the CCP and what they've done to working class people, what they've done to our economy, and most importantly, holding them totally responsible for this virus, totally responsible. Whether it's a biological weapons program, we're going to find out. Whether it leaked out of a lab in Wuhan, we'll eventually find out. What we do know is they have a chain of title. They knew about this in the last week of December or no later than the 1st of January. If they had just been responsible, 95% of the deaths, 95% of the economic carnage would have all been avoided, but they are not. You know why? They're an illegitimate government. They lied to the Chinese people. They promised land reform. They promised democracy. They promised rule of law. And all they've done is rule by the barrel of a gun. And those days, their days are numbered. Now we'll get into Hong Kong in a second, guys, but I'd like to hear your commentary and your analysis of that, gentlemen.
Well, Steve, hard to beat, honestly.
I need to catch my breath.
Yeah, very, very difficult to beat. I mean, we went through this Biden-Bernie unity document as well, and there are 20 references to China, but not references that are critical in any way, not references that say that there's going to be any attempt at aggression or even any defensive measures against what China is doing to the United States, Jack.
Well, you're seeing what I think is really important about all of this, Steve, is this alliance of liberty really is an alliance of the global deplorables, these good, decent people all around the world who realize that they've been scammed. And their good names, their good national names have been used to sell out the Chinese people. I think what we're seeing in many ways is a revolution of a morality rising to the surface where people are beginning to see China with clear eyesight. And Donald Trump has really got to take some credit for being out in the forefront and calling them out. Certainly, he's creating some courage around the world. You look at the Australians, they back down. They are not going to have any extradition treaty with Hong Kong because they do not agree with the future safety of the city. You're watching the British now are coming down hard on it. You're seeing the world begin to open up their eyes, just like we did between 1938 and the fall of 1931 with the Nazis, Steve. We're beginning to see the danger for what it is, and let's hope we can stop it before we get to some sort of kinetic outcome.
And we have to go to a quick break now, but Jack, I completely agree with you, and President Trump actually referenced that himself yesterday in the press conference, talking specifically about bringing other countries on board, and he was talking about the Huawei issue as well, and he said, look, I quote, I did this myself for the most part, not to use Huawei because we think it's an unsafe security risk. And he did do it himself in a great part. You know, that's the credit where credit's due. And to Steve Bannon, of course. We'll be right back after this break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room here on Capitol Hill. Greg Manns, Jack Maxey, and Raheem Kassam. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Remember, in turbulent times, it's going to be the entrepreneurs at the vanguard of what's going to lead us through this. If you're an entrepreneur, you need every piece of operating leverage you can get. The best tool is NetSuite by Oracle. It's a software package that pulls everything together, whether it's your financial projections, your financials themselves, human resources, capital asset pricing model, inventory, all of it. Oracle's the number one platform on the cloud. NetSuite's the number one platform for entrepreneurs. If your business is $1 million in revenue to $100 million in revenue, you need to check this out today. Go to netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon, and get the 7 action steps every entrepreneur should be taking during these turbulent times. Speaking of turbulent times, Raheem, Jack, let's go back to, I want to go to the Joe Biden's talk of yesterday. He did mention in 21 minutes, he did mention China one time. Can we actually, do we have that teed up? Can we play it?
Yeah, we can roll that clip right now. Joe Biden.
The United States owns and maintains an enormous fleet of vehicles. And we're going to convert these government fleets to electric vehicles, made and sourced right here in the United States of America.
There you go, Steve.
And to throw the hammer on his new green...
Is that what, I thought he actually mentioned China. Yeah.
Yeah, he mentions it
just
offhand.
He mentions it in the build-up.
About China.
Yeah.
That's his,
that was his substantive point, though, Steve.
Yeah, that's
But
Sam, that's the joke. Now, in his economic nationalism, he doesn't even get into to taking on China at all. It's a complete and total joke.
And then
this is what you saw in his tracker as President Trump. And by the way, CNN and MSNBC couldn't wait to get away from it. It was not in the lead headline at all in the Washington Post and New York Times initially. What President Trump did the whole day was in there about this great alliance he's putting together, both for information warfare, economic warfare, and hopefully not kinetic war, but you got to, this alliance he's putting together in the South China Sea and really going to be eventually in the Persian Gulf is going to be quite amazing and quite shows a lot of forethought. But Joe Biden's track record is terrible. The Democrats want to run away from it. You just saw Richard Haas. They're going to lay out, China's not important. It's race. It's unemployment. It's CCP virus. It's the deaths. Hey, the race problem, the underpinnings of the race problem is the economy and jobs and opportunity for blacks and for Hispanics in this country. And that's been suppressed by the elites. That's why they want, all these foreign students in colleges. That's why they don't want any access to tech jobs in Silicon Valley. They don't want any access to engineering schools or to postgraduate computer science schools. So the minorities can't get these jobs, that they're flooded to have to compete with people from all over the world who are not American citizens. And look, I love the fact of innovation. I love the fact of what's going on, but you got to take care of American citizens first. Okay, you got to take care of American citizens first. And you see this time and time again. Joe Biden won't address that. In fact, he goes the exact opposite. Joe Biden was in charge of. For President Obama, he was the point man on the pivot to Asia. He was the point man to stop cyber intrusions into our companies, to stop intellectual property theft. That's $3 trillion in total now, $600 billion a year in intellectual property theft, because Joe Biden couldn't get it done. The militarization of the South China Sea, what Mike Pompeo is putting together, this whole alliance in the South China Sea with Australia, Japan, the United Kingdom, to keep the most important waterway in the world, the South China Sea, totally open and free navigation. We had a destroyer in there yesterday, not kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party, free navigation. That's all because Joe Biden failed. They do not want to go through his record. You're going to see Richard Haas and all the establishment dismiss it. MSNBC and CNN won't want to cover it, right? They'll do it just enough in passing. So they say, oh, yeah, we talked about that, right? It's called Ben Smithing, right? Oh, yeah, but we talked about that. We talked about Biden. No, they haven't. We're going to rub Joe Biden and the Democratic elite's nose in this because they sold their country out. They know they look the other way, and now you get Richard Haas talking about economic nationalism. Now, one of the ways you saw do it, all the venture capitalists and private equity guys in these tech companies, all the leadership of the tech companies, all these narcissists, right? Almost I call them nihilists. They're all in bed or trying to get in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. You want to walk through this, Raheem? How now the United States is finally fighting back under the Trump administration, is finally dropping the hammer on this?
Well, I mean, remember, we've talked about now for years the idea that these Silicon Valley technology chiefs are our new, our new overlords. They decide what we can see, they decide what we can say, and they decide who is personed or not on social media, to the point of the President of the United States himself having been knocked off Twitter, having had tweets of his hidden by these guys, and all at the same time, in a parallel fashion, you've had incredible levels of Chinese, not investment, but kind of the takeover of a lot of these firms from the inside out. Now that you want to talk the intellectual property side of it, we can. You want to talk about the digital interference in the election side, we can. But more worrisome to me than any of this stuff is the hyper-targeting of young people in the Western world with these apps. And we know that India banned 59 of these in the last 2 weeks. And it's really important that we bring this back to the story that actually the New York Times, for all its faults, had a good story a couple of weeks ago about the targeting of ethnic minorities, of the Uyghur minorities in China. These Chinese developed apps, they would target them via advertisements. They would get them to accept access to their phones, access to their microphones, access to their clipboards, which is something that TikTok does as well, so they can identify who is where and when and what they're doing, not just in China, anywhere in the world. They showed that these whole hundreds of things that they deployed across the app stores, the Google App Store, the Android App Store, the iPhone's App Store, were targeting ethnic minorities, these Uyghurs, not just in China, but all across the world. Now, when you look at what they're doing over here, and why the Indians especially got ahead of this and banned TikTok, you look at how people are starting suddenly to realize, oh, TikTok has extraordinary levels of access to everything I do. It has extraordinary levels of access to things I copy and paste on my phone. And TikTok is, of course, owned by ByteDance, which is a company that, as per all companies in China, has to abide by Chinese Communist Party diktats of handing over data whenever that data is requested. And the same thing with Huawei, and the same thing with ZTE. All of these people, by the way, while President Trump's actions in the last 24 hours, as you say, Steve, have been one of the single most robust things that we've seen out of this administration, and especially on the topic of China at a critical juncture, there has also been a small build-up to this in the background. All of the FARA stuff that we've seen, the foreign agent registrations, this is a law that was originally founded to target Nazi propagandists in the Western world, has been used and has been deployed against people who are clearly working for the Chinese Communist Party, whether it's through ZTE, whether it's through Huawei. And there's actual cases at the moment going on, which we're monitoring, where lobbyists in Washington, D.C. are trying to claim that they don't need to file FARA as foreign agents because they work for these organizations. But it's entirely clear that whether it's the Department of Defense, whether it's the State Department, whether it's the White House, and now you're starting to see it in the Washington Post, you're starting to see it in the New York Times. These guys know that these tech companies and these technologies that are on our phones, that are in our devices, whether it's the hardware or the software, are Chinese Communist Party controlled.
Okay, quick response to that, Steve.
The White House has put out a number of.
In 1940, I believe it was the summer of 1940, the Roosevelt administration and the State Department banned all of these front operations that were being promoted by the German government and kicked them all out of the United States. They had consulates in every town with over 100,000 people, basically to push propaganda. They got rid of all of them. So there is quite a progressive precedent there that we could apply to some of these front operations for China. Two pieces of breaking news are coming out right now. Kanye West has dropped out of the presidential race. But here's something, we talk about, carrying the big stick. Apparently, Secretary Pompeo put a warning out to the world for all investors to get out of Nord Stream 2 while they can, get out of the Turk Stream project, get out now or risk the consequences, was his quotation. So I think we're having a full frontal attack on some of these existential enemies, Steve, that you've been so wisely warning the world about for many years.
Look, this is Jack. This goes to the. We'll talk about Kanye, which is actually, I think, more important than it's not to mock him. I actually think it's something we got to talk about. But on the Nord Stream 2, remember the axis of evil or the axis of China. Remember, they got their vassal states in North Korea, Pakistan, now a vassal state in Iran, which is kowtowing to them for $400 billion of financial aid and an output deal for their oil. I think Turkey's part of this, and certainly Russia. Russia is now becoming one of their partners. That's where this Nord Stream 2 is going to. Mike Pompeo is going to drop the hammer. Germany's going to have to stop playing both sides. Okay, they're not going to have to get. They're not going to be able to get cozy with the Russians and the Chinese, right? While we're footing the bill for NATO. Angela Merkel and those guys are a big scam. This German thing's a total scam. They're going to have to step up. That's one of the reasons that Robert O'Brien and Pottinger are over there this week to have a frank conversation with people. It's fantastic economic warfare, information warfare, this technology. I want to come back on Hong Kong. We're probably running out of time, but Raheem, I think another hammer they could drop is I think the U.S. government, I think the technology side, I think the president, I think there ought to be executive orders. I think there ought to be all types of things around TikTok. We ought to use TikTok as an example of what we can do about banning one of these technologies that's essentially there to get data and information from the American people. So I hope that the administration in the next couple of weeks starts taking this TikTok thing and the technology aspect of this, Raheem, as seriously as possible. What's the hashtag War Room Pandemic Posse saying? What are they saying on live chat? Besides the fact that Jack and I had a pillow fight early in the first segment?
Well, Steve, we have one of the most plugged-in audiences out there. I'm reading some of it now. Kick out all Confucius institutes is another thing that people are saying in the live chat this morning. Steve, is that something you agree with?
100%. Confucius Institute, the Committee on the Present Danger is one of the very first things we worked on. These Confucius Institutes are not really about, look, Confucius is somebody people ought to study, a fantastic philosopher. It's really the traditions of old China. That's not what it's used for. It's used as an aspect, it's a front organization. It's just like, it's the equivalent, Jack, of what you were talking about, the Bund organizations they had in the late 1930s. Right, that the Nazis were trying to get these ideas out in the United States. That's what the Confucius Institute is, a complete front organization of the Chinese Communist Party on all the major universities.
And just we got about 45 seconds left here. I just want to bring to your attention as well on the executive order on Hong Kong normalization yesterday, the line that says the administration will take steps to terminate the Fulbright exchange program with regard to China and Hong Kong with respect to future exchanges for participants traveling from and to China or Hong Kong. In the 30 seconds we have left here, do you know why specifically they've gone after this Fulbright program?
Well, I think they're going to go across a whole range of them. I think because these Chinese students, look, this is not about the Chinese people. They're innocent victims in this. But unfortunately, when you come over here as a student, it's been documented. You have to kind of sign up to be checked in. You check in with a handler at every aspect. So I think you're going to start to see, and this is why there was a big push on this ban of the college students if you're going to do the distance learning. This is something we got to come to grips with. The Chinese students, the Chinese people are innocent victims of the Chinese Communist Party. but somehow you gotta crack down on their intelligence gathering apparatus, and as soon as that will help take down the CCP, and as soon as that happens, the Chinese people will be free.
Right.
So I think you're going to see a whole raft of this stuff.
We're going to jump to a break now, and also on the National Pulse later on today, we're going to have a full explanation of the Fulbright program and how the CCP has been using it to push propaganda in the United States. We'll be back after this break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. Greg Mans, Jack Maxey, and Raheem Kassam here on Capitol Hill. Over to Stephen K. Bannon. We lost Steve. We may have lost Steve for the time being. We'll try and reconnect with Steve momentarily. We'll see if we can get Bannon back on board. In the meantime, why don't we actually roll the clip of Steve, if we can, what Steve Bannon said to Jesse Waters very recently. This kind of wraps up the hour really neatly into a nice little bow and actually shows you that, as Steve always says, and as we always say here on the War Room, action, action, action. And yesterday we saw action. Here's Steve from last week. Let's roll it.
Look, the tell was the other day when Joe Biden, who's the senator from Wilmington, Delaware, remember, he represents all the global corporations. He's been the biggest globalist in the Senate for 40 years. He pushed WTO for the Chinese. He pushed most favored nation. He pushed NAFTA. You know, Chuck Todd said yesterday on an interview, it was kind of stunning to see Joe Biden trying to recreate himself as an economic populist and an economic nationalist. The reason is that's where the country is. Donald Trump is a populist. He's an economic nationalist. He's the first president to confront China, but there's so much more to do. Right now in Hong Kong, President Trump ought to drop the hammer. That is Czechoslovakia in 1938. President Trump ought to cut him off from the U.S. dollar. He ought to sanction Hong Kong, Shanghai Bank, Bank of China, CITIC, Penang Group. He then ought to sanction individuals, Wang Qishan, and I think he ought to sanction President Xi. Wow. President Trump ought to throw down. President Trump ought to throw down. Look.
Do we have Bannon back with us?
Yeah, can you hear me, Raheem?
I got you. Hey, how come you look so good for Fox?
Pretty good on. It's later in the evening. The one thing is that yesterday with President Trump, now they set the mechanism. Remember, he signed the law that passed unanimously, and that was noticed by the CCP, right? That the Congress and the Senate, the American people united on this, which is pretty extraordinary in these turbulent times. Also, he signed an executive order. Now, they set up a lot of the mechanisms for sanctions, but he didn't go, look, the ultra hawks, and really, I think a lot of the hawks wanted much more action in this regard. They wanted to use the U.S. off by these exchanges to limit their access to U.S. currency through Hong Kong. Want to sanction the big financial institutions, just like in Iran. I think this Iran deal now is going to put China even more in play for sanctions, because now with banks and financial institutions that have been sanctioned by the United States government, it's time to sanction these financial institutions. It's the time to choke them down on both capital and technology. If you do that, the Chinese Communist Party will fail. Hong Kong is the anvil, and the U.S. dollar is the hammer. We take the high ground when it comes to information warfare, when it comes to technology, when it comes to capital, when it comes to economic warfare. They need access to our capital, they need access to our technology, and they need access to our markets. The entire CCP house of cards, the paper collapse, and this is why you're seeing in the South China Sea, the Navy is all talk, no action. When you see the United States, the Royal Navy, you see the navies of Japan, Australia, the free people in the world, India, come together to patrol the South China Sea, whether it's South China Sea on kinetic warfare, whether it's cutting them off from the dollar, whether it's sanctioning the banks, and I think sanctioning individuals. President Xi should be sanctioned personally. Wang Qishan, his other henchmen, should all be sanctioned for what they're doing in Hong Kong now. The total hammer wasn't dropped yesterday, but it's still available. And the mechanisms, the important thing is, remember, is the mechanisms to be set up. And once people, I think, start to understand, particularly people around President Trump, that this election is going to rise and fall, not on the stock market. It's going to rise and fall on the confrontation with China. And that's the Democrats' weakness. That's Joe Biden's weakness. And that's where the Bernie bros, that's where these Bernie economic nationalists will come to our cause again and deliver President Trump a victory in Wisconsin, Michigan, and in Pennsylvania.
Steve, the audience wants to know what can they do to help get more of this action on the table.
I think it's very simple. I think grab every article we put up on the site. Right now, you should be a agent. You should be a force multiplier. Here's the action you should take. You should be talking about this nonstop. In the summer of 16, remember, it was populism. We got nationalism going. We started talking about economic nationalism, about the border, about sovereignty. This is about the sovereignty of the United States. A lot of times people come and say, hey, Steve, you're on this pandemic thing. You're talking about China. We got to talk about 2020. This is not just 2020. This is 2050. The future of the nation revolves around this. The future of free men and women throughout the world revolve around this. The future of the freedom of the Chinese people revolve around this. Once the CCP falls, we're going to get to what Churchill called the sunlit uplands, right? We're going to have to go through a lot of turbulence and a lot of choppy water. This is not going to be easy. Here's what the deplorables can do. The deplorables can be a force multiplier. Push the show out, push all the articles we think out. Raheem, you talk about National Pulse is going to do an investigative piece on the Fulbright Scholarship this afternoon. Every deplorable should be pushing this out, sharing it, getting up on Facebook.
Steve, just while speaking of choppy, just while we have a slightly choppy connection to you, I want to get the words of Secretary Pompeo from this morning. Is this the clip I'm seeing, producer Vish? Okay, let's roll the clip of what Secretary Pompeo's announced just this morning. More action. Let's roll it.
Yesterday, President Trump signed the Hong Kong Autonomy Act and announced a series of actions through a presidential executive order. As he said in May, if China treats Hong Kong as one country and a single system, so must we. General Secretary Xi Jinping made a choice to violate the Chinese Communist Party's promises to Hong Kong that were made in a UN registered treaty. He didn't have to do that. He made that choice. We have to deal with China as it is, not as we wish it to be. Other nations are arriving at the same conclusion. Australia and Canada have suspended their extradition treaties with the territory. I leave on Monday for a quick trip to the United Kingdom and to Denmark. And I'm sure that the Chinese Communist Party and its threat to free peoples around the world will be high on top of that agenda. We'll certainly take time to discuss the UK's commendable decision to ban Huawei gear from its 5G networks and phase out the equipment from its existing networks.
Okay, Steve, you heard what the Secretary of State said there. We got about 30 seconds until break. Any closing thoughts before the next hour?
Action, action, action. All the people in the establishment that mock Donald Trump, you're seeing an alliance of liberty come together around true presidential leadership. He's a wartime president, at war against the pandemic, the CCP virus, and he's at war with the Chinese Communist Party. It's a hot war. It's a hot information.
We'll be back in just a second. More War Room Pandemic. Greg Mann, Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam returns. Don't go anywhere in just a second.